And now I'd like to invite Dr. Somshila, and she will be talking to us about complications of allergic eye disease and how to really manage them, and surgical management, different options that we have in terms of surgical management for ocular allergy. And thank you, ma'am, for sharing those two wonderful cases. I think that's very important for us to look for. We might miss these things if we are not really looking at the patients and, just really observing them before we even see the eye. Thank you.
Thanks, Akida. So, how many of us in the audience are actively dealing with patients with allergy? Is there anyone who didn't raise their hand? So, you're probably a retina specialist then. And how many of you I also see a lot of pediatric patients in the allergy age group? So, again, almost all of you. So, this talk is perfect for you because you probably didn't need the earlier talks that much, but my talk is about complications and how do you manage them. I'm just restricting to the surgical management because Rajesh had covered the medical management earlier, but you're free to ask questions. I'm trying to wind up both the talks in as fast as I can so that we have some time for discussion. Mine is loaded. Aapke saath hai.
We have time, ma'am. We have a good time for discussion as well as for both the talks.
See, Kita, this is what happens when you're very good and you upload your presentations and everything. They don't have it ready. It would have been better if I had got my laptop and correct. So, as I mentioned earlier that I was practicing for maybe almost 20 plus years at LV Prasad Institute, and I'm trying to set up a new place in Mumbai. And while setting it up, I realized that the patients that come in Hyderabad are very different, and I used to get bothered by them, but now I'm appreciating how well they used to listen to me compared to patients in Mumbai who are very, very, aware and well-to-do and so on. So we all know that it cannot be overemphasized that allergic eye disease and its associated conditions that go with it, and its sequelae and complications, and obviously cause severe visual loss. There are two pictures here I have. Next चल नहीं रहा है. So slides वहाँ change नहीं हो रहा.
Can we please check?
Okay, thank you. So the picture at the bottom is a case of atopic atopic keratoconjunctivitis, where these patients have very severe allergy and more frequently highly associated with corneal scar. And the figure at the top is a patient with VKC. So बहुत slow load हो रहा है. So my next slide was about the complications in allergic eye disease. And just to say that the complications in allergic eye disease can be due to the disease itself or it can be due to the treatment. कब लोड होगा? Next slide. Yeah.
Ma'am, it's working this side.
Oh, okay. Working fast, right? Yeah. Okay, all right. So complications are divided as it could be due to the disease itself directly, or it could be due to the treatment that we're giving. So you heard Dr. Rajesh mention about the side effects of steroids, but the various complications that occur due to the disease itself is, all of us know about shield ulcer. We also are aware now that the chronic limbal inflammation can cause limbal stem cell dystrophy disease. We can also have secondary infections such as microbial keratitis coming in. And we've discussed about keratoconus, which has a high association with allergy. And many of these conditions can cause ultimately corneal scarring, like post-microbial keratitis, even acute hydropsin keratoconus, and so on. Coming to the non-corneal complications, which are also important to know about, includes sort of a mechanical ptosis because of the GPC, and this is very bothersome, especially cosmetically bothersome also, and functionally bothersome to the patient and parents. Periocular pigmentation we had discussed, and that is also almost like a cosmetic blemish for the child. And the dry eye that can set up due to either the chronic condition and partly sometimes due to a lot of treatment, lot of drugs going on in the eye. And we can have cataract glaucoma, and then if we start the child on or patients on oral steroids or immunomodulator therapy, and then we have to look at the side effects of that therapy as well. So, where do we have to resort to surgical intervention? That is really the meat of my presentation today. So, when we have shield ulcer, it can be because you have there is a mixed mechanism in the development of shield ulcer. It includes both the mechanical component where the giant papillae keep rubbing the corneal surface, which already has deposits due to the very high eosinophilic cells roaming around in the tear film. And these cells cause complexes with the mucus present on the eye, and they keep on impacting themselves in the area of the ulcer. That's how you have a shield ulcer. In the terms of complications of steroid-related cataract and glaucoma, that is a direct mechanism, just like any other reason why you have. I've already discussed about limbal stem cell deficiency. So the hypothesis that we had forwarded way back when I was doing fellowship, I think, is that the chronic limbal inflammation that you have here affects even the environment present for the limbal stem cells, and then as the inflammation keeps perpetuating, it can directly affect the stem cells itself, and you can have these patients having pannus formation on the cornea and a very small amount of available clear cornea. In very chronic patients, you might see this kind of clinical picture, and I have another case which I'll show you. And this is a patient with very chronic LSCD, which luckily now has improved. And you just have a small window of clear cornea present in the center. So coming to how do you deal with giant papillary conjunctivitis, this is already covered by Dr. Rajesh. So he talked about where you can give the supratarsal steroid injection. This injection really works wonders. And you can also give an alternate to giving triamcinolone acetonide is also to give methylprednisolone. This is a shorter term acting steroid, and it goes in much more easily than triamcinolone, so you can create a huge balloon like you did over here. And its propensity to raising the intraocular pressure is lower than triamcinolone. But then of course you must be able to measure the intraocular pressures in these children and never give this injection, this depot, if you are not able to if you're not able to monitor them post-operatively, because you can cause quite severe glaucoma. So you have to give, as he mentioned earlier, that more than one injection here. Some of it is just going subconjunctival. That's why it's ballooning up so well. But we're hoping that at least most of it is going in the supratarsal space, where it will last for about 3 to 4 weeks, and it will sort of jumpstart the effect on dampening the allergy. And there's very rapid resolution. So the results are so dramatic that by next day morning itself, you can see that the child is much more comfortable, and slowly that our chronic eye rubbing cycle is broken for the patient. There are many other methods to tackle GPC, some of which are kind of successful, some are not. So started off earlier papers covered simple excision and cryoablation, but then it's very, very highly associated with recurrence, and the other problem is causing that scarring in the superior conjunctiva. So I would not recommend this method at all. So if you have giant papillae, you can excise them provided you cover them either with AMG or even with mucous membrane. So of late the group from SN, Dr. Geeta, when she was there, and others at SN have been talking about using mucous membrane graft, but they're doing it for very chronic recurrent GPC, where despite even excision or using all medication including steroids, there is no resolution, and it chronically erodes the ocular surface, and they have reported very good success, and our group at LVP has also done a few such cases. But what I do in cases with GPC where everything else has been tried, and it's so severe is that combine it with supratarsal steroid injection, and if I excise some of the very huge papillae, then I apply AMG either single or multi-layered, and I feel that that gives a long-term benefit for these patients. So I'm coming to one of my cases, 16-year-old, and he had VKC for the past 4-5 years with very severe recurrent episodes, and also he came with multiple episodes of shield ulcer as well as a child. And by age 16, he was unable to perform well in school. He was going to depression also. And for these cobblestone papillae, so we had put him even on oral steroids, but that was not really breaking the cycle for him. So we decided to go ahead and excise the papillae. This was in one of his eyes, which was worse, and our very gentle surgical excision of the huge papillae, some of which we left behind, and put a multi-layered AMG as well as supratarsal steroid injection, and continued with short-term low-dose oral steroids, and of course tacrolimus ointment, which he continues to use now. So he did well, and even at 6 months post-op, he was doing pretty well. Has mild reactivations, but the cornea is okay. And since then, he has completed his engineering studies, and now he recently wrote to me saying that he's even got a job. So that was a good case that we could manage. Coming to shield ulcer, these are more peculiar to AKC and VKC, atopic keratoconjunctivitis and vernal. And for grade 1, so remember, shield ulcer is specific indication where we actually need to use topical steroids, and better to be aggressive. So in shield ulcer, I do tend to use prednisolone, but follow up the patient very carefully. So for grade 1, which is where you have very clean looking base, it has just started, so usually steroids and BCL will work. But when you have the base, which is in the picture, the third picture that you see up there, and the fourth picture, where I mentioned grade 2 to 3 and grade 3. So these kind of cases won't improve just with conservative management. We'll have to go in, excise that plaque. So if you see that plaque under the microscope, it is nothing but it's just sort of impacted mucus in multiple layers. It looks like a sandwich. So for that, nothing will penetrate it. You have to remove it. And the risk of, do I have 5 minutes? The risk of shield ulcers is that it's open, there's an ulcer there, so very prone to secondary infection, like in this 8-year-old girl who had bilateral severe VKC, and she had shield ulcer in the right eye and corneal infiltrates. When we did corneal scrapings, we got gram-positive cocci. Luckily, she responded well to topical antibiotics, but did develop a scar. So we had published about the management and clinical outcomes of patients with shield ulcers. And in our cohort, because we tended to see more severe cases, we saw that whenever we were resorting to surgery for these shield ulcers, the group where we applied an amniotic membrane did better than the group where we did not apply an amniotic membrane. But again, we've seen the severe cases. So I would say for shield ulcers, for very mild cases, topical steroids and BCL. For moderate cases, you do have to excise it and continue with topical steroids and BCL till resolution. And for more severe or that very thick plaque kind of cases, apply an amniotic membrane after excision. And in all the 3 instances, because most of the time you will have GPC for sure, so in all the 3 kind of cases, use supratarsal injection of steroids. So we also looked at overall the demographic profile of VKC, especially to look at all sorts of complications. We had about 500 patients here, and we saw that luckily not too many, but 10% developed corneal scars, about 6% had keratoconus, and about 6% and 3% had cataract and glaucoma each. So the overall percentage-wise, 20% of our patients had complications in a group of 500 patients. One of the very, very challenging complications to deal with is when you have a pediatric patient, as it is, it's VKC, very bad VKC, and then you have keratoconus as well. So here we have to resort to very early collagen cross-linking, because you know that it's going to progress in these cases. Also, these patients can come in with acute eye drops. Can you unlock it or something?
Yeah, I'm just telling them, ma'am, because you have 2 talks, so they thought that 1 talk is over. So can we please remove the...
Okay, it's progressing. So here's one patient, young patient, I think 13 years old, with advanced keratoconus in one eye and presented acute eye drops in the other eye. It's the same presentation. वही है.
please don't change the presentation, just remove the notification that the time is up and we can continue with the same talk.
Third one. So, this is a 10-year-old girl, and she came presented with eye drops in one of the eyes. So, despite doing air injection for this child, there was really no change in the eye drops. So, what we decided is to repeat the air injection, and this time we use C3F8, repeat the gas injection, and luckily, slowly the patient improved. So, this is just a surgical video to show what we did for this child. So, you can see that very large eye drops and made a paracentesis, and just like how in DSEX sometimes we use venting incision, so here we used a carefully placed a venting incision and literally could squeeze out fluid. You see that how the fluid is getting squeezed out from the stroma in more than one site. You have to be very careful because there's just epithelium and then hardly any stroma, and then there's endothelium, the Descemet's membrane. So you can see almost visually that now the edema in the cornea looks less. So we very gently massaged out all the fluid, and then at the end of the case injected C3F8 into the eye and kept it for at least, and it slowly resolved after a few weeks. And finally this patient did very well. So this is just to show another technique of doing C3F8 by massaging out the fluid, especially in such huge giant eye drops. So 6 months later there was an anterior stromal scar and we could fit a contact lens, and she had fairly good 20/50 vision with the contact lens. But nowadays, that was in 2016, so for the past couple of years or more, what we do is, published by my colleague Dr. Sunita Chaurasia, is a modified technique of compression sutures. So compression sutures have been going on for a while. In fact, the earlier presentations was in 2007 or something like that, where they talked about air injection or C3F8 with compression sutures. But with this modified technique of compression sutures, you can literally on table see that the DM gets attached, and there is a very rapid resolution within a week's time. So this picture shows actually within a week's time how the edema has cleared. So that was about acute eye drops in patients with VKC and keratoconus. Coming to limbal stem cell deficiency, I mentioned earlier that it's a chronic limbal inflammation that causes this disease. And we have also published earlier that what could be the putative mechanism in these cases, and what else can we do. So we can, earlier days we would do cultivated limbal epithelial cells, but now routinely if you have patients with VKC and stem cell deficiency, simple limbal epithelial transplant, SLET surgery can be done in these cases. And if we have to do penetrating keratoplasty along with this, then we can do a donut AMG. So we have published all these techniques, and you can maybe read through them, the references I've put down there. So what about glaucoma? Glaucoma, of course, has to be handled very aggressively, and maximum medical therapy, because all of the anti-glaucoma agents also cause ocular surface problems. So, and sometimes you might have to resort to an earlier surgery than an adult cohort, because many of these patients are pediatric. The cataract, the special concerns in cataract is, especially, we know we can treat the cataract, but the problem is the keratometry here, and this was one such patient who had advanced VKC with corneal scarring due to limbal stem cell deficiency and had a cataract, and the IOL power, depending, so if we used the K1, K2 from the oculizer readings, so the IOL power was -2, but if we just used the IOL master, the IOL power was 14 diopters. So there's so much variation in the IOL power calculation, so we have to be very astute and decide very carefully which IOL to use. Since we were not planning to operate on the cornea at any time soon, so we used the keratometry that was derived from the corneal topography, and we had a fairly good result for this patient who underwent bilateral cataract surgery. So that's all from my side, Ikeda. I really want to thank Ikeda. She's been conducting this course on allergy since Jaipur AIOS, almost pre-COVID and post-COVID. So this is the 5th or 6th year running. Soon we'll have to celebrate the anniversary of this. We've always had very engaging audience, very interactive audience. Usually a fuller hall than this, but there's a lot of competition today for us. And this is my team at Shantilal Sanghvi Eye Institute, and I'm practicing. And I'd like to invite all of you who are coming to Mumbai, please visit this really lovely center which has come up thanks to many people who are aware of what is socially good for the patients, and we'll be happy to take you around this facility. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. We always learn many more things from you and understand what else is new has come up in the last recent years with respect to this topic. Do we have any questions or any comments that any audiences would like? Yes, please, sir. Please come to the mic.
Good morning. You said about -2 power of the IOL to
Yeah.
+14.
Yes.
And then how you titrated and how you managed, because you took a reading, entire reading from the optical biometer, or then mix and match with the, because this is
Yeah.
very unusual, -2 to +14.
Yeah, because the optical biometer would it just measures the. I don't know why it gave 14. I have to go through that case once again. But the keratometry was a very steep cornea, as you saw in the topography. So that was a true power. The true power from the pentacam is what we used finally for this patient. And we didn't plan a toric lens also for this patient, because we don't know in future we might address the cornea as well as the patient grows up. So we used a non-toric lens, and I think we were left with a residual cylinder of -4 or something like that.
But then the axial length was also getting affected with any difference?
No, the axial length was not getting affected. It was mainly the keratometry was the
That is fine.
problem.
That's okay.
Yeah, it was the keratometry. And it also might have been because the surface may have been irregularly, we should have looked at whether we should have repeated the readings multiple times to see if it was a surface irregularity, was a VKC active at the time point. So this is just a demonstration that supposing in a quick, busy clinic, you just do an IOL master and you use that one-time reading to plan your surgery instead of repeatedly doing at least 2 or 3, just like how you would plan for a very complex case where you're getting multiple readings. So.